Yeah, I'm muted. That's a great start. Run this back. Play that music again, Tyler. Let's go. Let's go. Pretend that never happened. Yeah, count me down. Let's go. Come on. This is meant to happen this way. All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Awesemo.com's On the Contrary Week 8 edition. Taking a contrarian look at things as we always do on this show every Friday at 11 a.m. I'm Dave Loughran. On the Twitters at Laffy_D, joined by Alex Baker, hanging out in beautiful Miami, Florida at Awesemo DFS. What's good, brother?
What's up, guys? Yeah, playing DFS down in Miami hits a little bit different, I'll tell you. Last night I sweated the game. That was a crazy one. I was hanging out with this guy that whistles go woo, and he almost won $1 million, but came a little short. So it was a wild night. But the best thing about NFL is we got another chance to win $1 million on Sunday, so it should be a good one.
And of course, joining us for the second time this season, we love having him on. Brian Hooper, you might know him as Brick75. I think it's Brian Hooper __ on Twitter, which is, all right, just remember _. You can check out all his work at brick75.com. That's BRIC, no K, 75.com. And the Lulz podcast, LOLZ, all caps, of course, with Pete Overzet. What's going on, brother?
Not much. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Alex, Jay Booty, is he being contrarian by not wearing a hat? Nah, man, went out and got a haircut this morning, a little skin tape at 9 a.m. And 5 sheriffs popped up in the barber shop looking for somebody. And, even when Alex, even when they're not coming for you, there's always that feeling like, did I do something? You know what I mean? Like, I'm waiting for, is there a Dave Loughran in here? Because they came barging in, looking for people, brought him into the back. Apparently a guy that used to work there had a warrant out for him for trafficking narcotics. So, yeah, it was an eventful morning.
That's wild, man. I imagine it must have affected your haircut because I know you went in there and being like, I need that Mark Davis.
So, Brian, did you see the Photoshop the guy did or the girl did of Alex with the Mark Davis haircut?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that one. And on our show, we talked about there was one with Alex photoshopped in a hot tub too, I believe.
Oh, that's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, whoever's doing that, I don't remember. I'll give them credit next show, but yeah, we're going to give people volunteered to do it for free Awesemo Plus to do the Mark Davis haircut and come on a stream. So I don't know. Says something good about our tools, right, Alex?
Yeah, I think a sub is worth the Mark Davis haircut for sure. But Brian, man, you always do great interviews on your show, and I had a couple of questions about this interview you had with Chess is Okay, because you guys definitely aren't afraid to talk about some tough issues. First thing, he said that to be a good DFS pro, you need to grind 80 hours a week. I was just wondering how you feel about that.
Well, he didn't say 80 hours a week for DFS pro. He said 80 hours a week for NBA.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, I kind of push back at him. I'm like, I think that's a little, especially for NBA, you guys know, there's so much news in the last 45 minutes or whatever. It's like everything you did when you started working at 11 a.m. or whatever, it might just be worthless. So 80 hours seems a little extreme to me. But then Blender did a podcast with Petty Theft, who's also an excellent NBA DFS player.
We've had him on here a couple of times. He's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He said, and he's came on our show too. He says he puts in 80 hours a week.
Wow.
So maybe I'm just slacking. I don't know, Alex. I think I heard you say on one of Pete's shows that that's a little high for you too.
Yeah, I mean, dude, if you do the math, that's 11 and a half hours a day on fantasy. I love fantasy. I don't love it to the point where I'm like, yo, Nina, my wife, I can't hang out. I got to do 80 hours a week of fantasy. It probably wouldn't go over that well anyway. But I mean, one of the nice things today is you can leverage a lot of the stuff everyone else is doing. Watch a couple podcasts, you can kind of get up to speed, and you got all these tools at your disposal. So the more you can leverage all these resources, the less you have to work on your own. And there's other ways to get an edge than trying to figure out who's going to play one more minute than the sites have them projected for.
Yes, definitely. I think they would push back and say we're doing a little bit more than that, but that's what I'm picturing. They're spending 50 minutes like, will LeBron get 36 or 36 and a half? So, I mean, but for me, it's always the time spent is like building out my process and like the tools I use for myself, or if you make your own projections, like that stuff all takes a lot of time and thinking and coming up with stuff. But yeah, coming up with like studying the slate every day for 80 hours, like, no, that's not. I probably wouldn't play DFS if I had to do that.
No, Alex, you'd be divorced as quick as you got married.
Yeah. And like the funny thing is, like, okay, so you're doing the math here. Lock on the West Coast where petty theft is at 4 p.m. So for him to put in 11 hours on a slate, he would have to start at like 5 a.m. with
no breaks though.
Yeah. Maybe he's counting late swaps.
Like, that's a lot of time.
One other question I had is, you got James was throwing a lot of shade on the show, and I feel like you never had an opportunity to call anyone out yourself. Is there anyone that you want to call out?
Megan Joy. I just want to compliment her. Actually, she's probably the best female DFS player currently going. We're assuming female based on the name. I guess that could be wrong. But yeah, if anyone knows how to contact her and she would like, or he would like to come on our show, please tag me on Twitter.
Well, that was the nicest call out I've ever heard, man. Also, Megan, if you're ever watching this, hit us up, put you in touch with Brian. One question I had, like, I feel like maybe you'd be mad at Hoop 2410 because everyone calls him Hoop, and therefore you can't use that as your nickname.
Right, which is
hard
why
hitting question.
No, I don't. He's welcome to Hoop 2410. I'm glad he has it.
So you don't hate him.
I don't.
All right, let's dive into this one. Again, you can follow Brian at Brian Hooper _ brick75.com and on the Laws podcast if you're just jumping in now, and hit that thumbs up. Happy to have everybody with us on a Friday morning. If you haven't done so yet, only takes a second, and you know it. We'll always be free here on YouTube. All of our YouTube content, always 100% of the time, everything here will be free. We'll never dumb it down. We'll never hold back. But if you enjoy it and you want to see more and help us combat the overlords here at YouTube and the algorithms, well, thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 70K. And last thing, if you want to join, get the custom emojis, the sweet badges, and shout outs, of course, and priority questions, all of that good stuff. You don't have to. No big deal. Doesn't affect me. But you want to become part of the team, hit that join button down below and get those sweet badges you see in there in chat and all those custom emojis like Alex and myself and Adam and everybody else. So, all right, let's dive into it. Brian, we'll go to you first. I am curious how you approach, and we saw this last week with the 10-game slate. This is a 12-game slate, a little bit different, but I am curious how you approach a game or games, multiple games, as my dog loses her shit in the background, multiple games where you've got a team that's a huge favorite. Are you willing to go full out onslaught with no run backs? And we can dive deeper into this with the Rams and stuff, but how do you approach that when a team on the other side just has very little touchdown equity, but the team they're facing has like a 30+ point total?
Yeah, I'm not afraid to play those games. Like, 'cause especially we're trying to get lucky. I know we're all working hard to predict the future, but
80 hours a week, man.
There you go. So yeah, but it's tough to be exactly right. So like when these rare outcomes happen, it could benefit you. So like if the spread is, whatever, 10 or something like that, or 12, but the other team actually hangs in there, it could actually benefit you. So like last week, there's still tons of randomness in this. Cause last week, Detroit Rams, I watched the beginning of that game. There was a quick swift touchdown, followed up by an onside kick, right? I don't know if you guys saw that. So there's an onside kick, and
Dan Campbell's a madman, and I love it.
And then they kick the field goal, so they're down 10-0. Half a quarter was wasted though. So it's good that, okay, now the Rams are actually going to be passing a lot. And I was heavy on the Rams, but they lost half a quarter, right? And now I was also heavy on Henderson too. So it's like, okay, well, he's not going to get those free extra 6 or 7 rushes at the end of the game when they're up by 18 or something. You know what I mean? So it's a give and take. But I'm definitely not afraid of it.
Yeah, no question. And Alex, I'm actually really looking forward later in the show getting into like how we approach running backs on these teams with monster totals. You know, the obvious answer is you play them, right? But what about people that are in single entry or 3 max where, you know, they might love a Darrell Henderson, but also a Cooper Kupp and stuff like that, and feel like maybe they want to get exposure to that game everywhere. But I know Brick said this, and I think you agreed with him last time he was on, that you're not always compelled to have a, you know, standard run back on every team. And maybe that's a blind spot that the industry's had for years now, where it's like, if you're stacking a team, you have to have a run back.
Yeah, definitely. So the run back, you're really hoping that like a team that is a big favorite stays in the game, where they still have to pass, like with the Rams last week, where Matthew Stafford had a big game because the Lions put up some points. The worry this week is, I mean, it's the same basic scenario where they're facing Houston, but if Houston doesn't put up those points, then maybe the Rams run the ball more and your stack doesn't get there. So that's where you want to have a run back, is when you're really needing the other team to exceed expectations to stay in the game. But if you flip it around and you're picking Houston, maybe not the best example, but Brandon Cooks could have a huge game and then the Rams do well, but no individual player like breaks the slate. So because those guys are expensive, if you fade Henderson and you go to Swift per se, and the Rams have a good day, Henderson gets like 20, but then Swift goes off. I mean, that's a pretty good pivot. So that's kind of that analysis that you want to be doing.
All right, so Brian, let's actually dive into this Rams game a little bit further and talk about how we can approach this now that we kind of got the foundation laid out. You've got Darrell Henderson on DraftKings specifically, who is, I mean, I think we'd all agree that the salary on him this week, given the total and given his workload, seems pretty low. But then you have Cooper Kupp, who has multiple touchdowns in literally more than half of his games this year. Robert Woods, obviously, all that preseason hype hasn't necessarily come to fruition, but he's still on a good team and a high passing volume offense. Tyler Higbee. Then you've got guys like Van Jefferson that pop off once in a while, Deshaun Jackson. How are you getting to this game in terms of like running back, wide receiver with Stafford? Because that actually won a tournament the other week. Henderson had that receiving touchdown. Will you go running back, wide receiver without Stafford in some of these? What are your thoughts for the Rams this week as monster favorites against an awful Houston team?
Well, you know, it is Friday, so this could change, just a little caveat there. But I just ran my Sims before the show, and I'm going to have a ton of them. So with Henderson and Kupp too, mainly is the big exposures for me, with Stafford coming in as my third highest exposed QB.
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I think the stack is intriguing on our top stacks tool. We have the Rams at 8% ownership and 24% top stack. So even despite that, I mean, this incorporates a chance that this is a blowout and everything. So we could definitely see Stafford throw for 300, even if it's a blowout. So I don't mind stacking it up. And you got basically 3 stud players in Woods, Kupp, and Henderson. If the team comes close to this 31-point total, one of them is probably going to have a really good game. So this is one of our most confident spots this week. So,
Alex, you know, I ask this question all the time, right? Just because I feel like with some of these offenses, it's worth asking. And I get asked this question a lot, oftentimes to ask to you guys. How do you feel about a Henderson Kupp with no Stafford? You know, when it comes to because when it comes to the probability that, you know, maybe Henderson has a big game, Kupp has 2 touchdowns, but they're the only touchdowns on the game, but they lean kind of heavily on the run. So Stafford doesn't get you there. Is that something that works this week for you?
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's not something I want to target Henderson and Cup without Stafford, because if they do have a really big day, Cup in particular, he's 9K. If he like has a huge day, it's pretty likely Stafford also performed pretty well. So having that correlation does benefit you. And then with Henderson as well, he does get some receiving yards. So, I mean, you're kind of hoping that the Rams have a big day and Stafford doesn't have a big fantasy performance, which isn't the most likely scenario. So I prefer having them as one-offs if I'm not stacking it up probably. But, I mean, they're both super popular too. So it's not something I'm going to be going out of my way to do.
All right, Brian, let me formulate that question a little bit differently for you. What if it's Henderson and Woods without Stafford, knowing that you don't need as much out of Woods as you would from somebody like Cooper Kupp at 9K?
I'm over on Woods and Van Jefferson with this,
okay,
with this latest sim. Yeah, over the field anyways. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's all I've talked about this before. It's all just like, does that correlation outweigh the other interactions?
Right.
So like if correlation doesn't rule everything, but obviously if it, and the rule of thumb is if it's the same amount of like fantasy points, go with the correlation if you're deciding between two different combos, because if you get a touchdown, Luffy, if we're on the same team, that means I didn't.
For sure.
Right? So there is still some, in specific circumstances, negative correlation there. And not everyone is correlated the same, right? And you can see this if you do simulations, play-by-play simulations. So if you're just going to go with a blanket correlation matrix that you could find on Google, like, it might be a little misleading. Like that run back might not be as good as you think.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. It's a good way to explain it for sure. And that's what I like talking about on these shows too. If we're doing on the contrary, not just the actual plays, but how you're looking at them, because that's what people want to hear. Alex, with the 5K running backs this week, it's a little murky, right? Because you have guys like Khalil Herbert, who's been really good lately. I think he's like the RB4 he's second in carries over the last 3 weeks. Damian Williams returned from the COVID-19 list, and this dude ended up getting virtually no work because Herbert was the guy. And then you have Eli Mitchell, who Trey Sermon's not getting worked in at all. JaMychal Hasty's getting a little in the passing game, but Eli Mitchell's the clear guy on the ground. Then you have Miles Sanders. He did just go to the IR, by the way. He's going to be down for 3 weeks. So you got Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. They're probably going to bring Jordan Howard up. And then a guy like Michael Carter, all of them within a few $100s of each other. How much is ownership playing into how you're getting to any of these guys this week?
Yeah, I mean, there's some intriguing options. You mentioned Herbert, so let's start there. I think that's a really intriguing situation where Damian Williams came back Saturday off the COVID list. He only got to practice with the team for 1 day before the game, and then Herbert got most of the work. So now with a full week to practice, I'm a little bit worried that the pendulum's going to switch a little bit. They did say Herbert was past Damian Williams in the depth chart, but I don't know if that means he's going to get most of the work or just kind of like a slim majority. So that one, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't think Herbert's going to be super popular. They're playing the 49ers this week. So it's a tough matchup. Yeah, you can take a shot on, but I don't feel tremendously confident in Herbert.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Brian, you have Herbert with our projections right now. Herbert at 3%. Mitchell's at like 9%. I'm assuming Gainwell's ownership is probably only going to keep coming up, especially now that Miles Sanders has been confirmed out. Where are you coming in on since you've run lineups or simulations with these guys?
Yeah, so Chicago, I have like barely anyone. I got Komet, and Herbert and Robinson, but just a couple, 2-3% for all three of them. And they're playing who? San Fran?
Yeah, the Niners. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm under on Debo by quite a bit.
Interesting.
And just not a whole lot from that game.
let me ask you this then Brian, when it comes to like relatively good players on bad teams, how do you grade guys like this? Because, you know, like just the opportunity to score a touchdown is so much less with like a Michael Carter on that offense, even if he's getting volume. Brandon Cooks would probably be another good example of that. I think we could go down the list and find plenty of them. Khalil Herbert being another one. Are those guys that, you know, you rarely get to just because they're on such bad teams?
So for me, we talked about this earlier. I'm kind of the opposite of petty theft and chess is okay, where I don't want to make the decisions myself if I don't have to. Right. So I let all these interactions that I try to program in to my simulations determine it for me, so I don't have to think, and I just go with it. So like I really never have very rarely do I have like some strong conviction plays, or I'll adjust something just because I'm like, this can't be right. And so like whatever it spits out, because I don't think it's possible for, I mean, okay, maybe 0.001% of the population can keep all these interactions in their head and calculate it and do it. And that just happens to be petty theft and chess is okay. Fine. But for the majority of us, I don't think it's possible to put all this into our head and be like, and not like double count, right? And all sorts of things and be like, okay, no, this is the ideal play and this is worth it, right? So like, I feel like for the way I do it, the way I want to play, I have to do it through these simulations, and then whatever it tells me, I just do.
Brian, let me push back on this a little bit, because a simulation doesn't think for itself. It only does what you tell it to do. So like you have to like set the inputs for a simulation. So yeah, like you must have I guess if you're like using other projections, like maybe you wouldn't have to like really have opinions, but like do you like go off of that, or do you like when you make the projections, are you kind of having some personal opinions? So
that's completely fair, and that's true. So like even when you're making your own projections on individual players, like you're making choices there that are going to be like you picking a player essentially. But I think it's less subjective, Alex, and I'm sure you agree with it. Like looking at the past data and weather and how all these things affect player projections. But this year is the first year where I'm not using my player projections. I'm using yours and some others, and kind of coming up with a little adjustments of my own. And not using because speaking of 80 hours a week, it takes a lot to maintain your database and all this stuff. And you guys, it's close enough anyway, you know, to what I would have had. And who knows if mine was even right, which is kind of goes to your point of like, okay, you're kind of guessing anyways, but I think it's less subjective. And then when you get to the simulation part, it's actually even probably more subjective than coming up with projections, because you're going to have to cut corners, because you can't mimic reality as much as we'd want to think we could, right? Like, and even if you could, Alex, right? Like my computer would explode from processing power, right? So like you have to make it as efficient as you can without losing any of the things that we know for a fact matter. And so like, I know for a fact, if I throw the ball to you, there's correlation there. So I know that has to show up in my simulation somehow. So like, that's what I do. Player X throws to this guy. Okay, what does that mean? And then also, come in with distributions. This also goes to your point. I don't know if we're getting too deep in the weeds here, but coming up with distributions is another kind of subjective thing, because the sample size in football is so small that does Tyreek Hill's distribution look the same as Deebo Samuel's or whatever? I don't know, I'm trying to think of someone who's there would be comparable. And do we just use a blanket distribution for all these things? And these are subjective choices that you're going to have to make if you want to kind of do the style that I like.
And by the way, if you're using those projections or want to use those Awesemo projections, thanks for that, Brian. Perfect segue for myself. Use the promo code On the Contrary, because it'll get you 25% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Ownership, boom bust tool, top stack tool, player projections, of course. And Alex, again, not to get too deep into the weeds here, but when Brian talks about simulations, I mean, you have tools that do that for people so they don't have to run them on their own.
Yeah, definitely. I think simulations are a great way, like Brian is saying, where like it's hard to like piece all these pieces of information together, like just by thinking about it. So it really helps to have some tools to put it in perspective. So those kind of guide a lot of our tools, like the player props, top stacks, and the boom bust, where you can get the results of our simulations and get the same conclusions just by like knowing like the percentages, the probabilities, the odds that guy's gonna to be in the winning lineup. So that really helps inform your decisions for your lineups.
Is it fair to say that a new tagline should be, become an Awesemo Plus member and no longer spend 80 hours a week on research?
That was actually like the idea behind the site, because like at these live finals, people would come up, they'd be like, I want to do what you do, but I have like a family, I have a job.
Yeah,
like most people don't have 80 hours to devote to fantasy, funny as it turns out.
You're going to be marketing to an audience of 2, though, so I'm not sure you should.
Yeah. So what we need to do is convince everyone that to be successful, it takes 80 hours a week on your own, right? And then be like, hey, if you're successful, but you want to have your life back, we can expedite the process. That'll work. Brian, is that a 6-string bass back there?
No, that's a acoustic guitar.
From here, it looks like there's knobs on the back end of the neck, like a 6-string would have.
No, because it's a Fender acoustic, so it's not on both sides.
Gotcha. Okay. Any good?
I used to be a guitar teacher when I was younger.
Really?
I got in a car accident, ripped my thumb off, and then so it's like it's all seized up right here. Like I can't bend it. But I lost the bug anyways. Like I wasn't. I just didn't care anymore. So I haven't played guitar in like 15 years.
That's crazy. I have mine hanging up on the wall in the basement too. I look at it often. I take it down once in a while. I play electric, but yeah, you're right. Once you lose it, it's tough to get it back, man. It really is.
Dude, well, I can get it back. I can get it back, I think.
No, the passion, I mean.
The passion, gotcha.
Or your thumb.
My thumb, yeah, that's the tough part.
Dude, you're such a man of mystery. Like we learn a little bit about you on every show.
I know, it's great.
Like this guy also used to work in like politics, like the like Illinois. Like I remember you saying you worked with some politicians or something.
I did, yeah. I worked.
Don't say who. We'll lose half of our ownership, viewership. Yeah.
Well, it's Illinois, so of course you know.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
Chicago, especially, but yeah. But I have no affiliation anymore, so.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just watching like the viewership plummet one way or the other. All right, let's get back on track here. Alex, one thing I was wondering about, and I think this actually speaks to what Brian was talking about and what you talk about often, and what our tools kind of do for you. I'm honestly not trying to shill, but I feel like there is an element of like overthinking things, and I say paralysis by overanalysis when it comes to good offenses going up against good defenses. And a lot of times there's just this assumption that the good defense is always going to win out. You hear it all the time, like, man, I don't want to play him against this team that's a great defense, and then ownership is really low. What are you doing with a team like, say, a perfect example this week, I think, is Bucs and Saints, because the Saints have a good pass rush. They have a good secondary that's getting help. The team's getting healthy. Their run defense is super stout. But then you've got the Bucs on the other side that even without Antonio Brown, they're just an electric offense that is essentially lit up almost every team they face. So how do you how do you approach a scenario like this with a really good offense and a really good defense, especially if ownership is low on that offense?
Yeah, I think the thing we got to look at is kind of what you're saying, where the defense matters a little bit, but the Bucs have a team total of 27 this week. That's only 3 points lower than most weeks. So let's not get too scared off by that. Antonio Brown being out actually helps in fantasy a decent amount. I think he's doubtful now, but same point is that that consolidates production among fewer players. So those players are going to be better fantasy plays. So I think that the Bucs, they're definitely a stack that I'm taking a close look at this week. Our top stack tool is 5% ownership, 8% top stack, so we get some leverage there. And the other thing I love about the Bucs is their passing rate. If you go to our advanced stats tool, you can find that for every team, but they have one of the highest passing rates in the league, 65% of the time. That just gives you that upside where if they pass the ball even more than normal, you could have a killer week.
Same thing to you, Brian. What do you do when you get situations like this? I mean, I essentially know what you're going to say, and because you've kind of already explained it.
Right.
But is there anything to add to that?
It's interesting looking after I run it and then maybe, rationalizing it. And let me kind of just answer a little more broadly then. So like, okay, what I said is the way I do it, but then you're sitting there at home and you're like, okay, like I'm not going to be doing that. Like I'm not spending time learning simulations and statistics and all this stuff, which is, by the way, a completely reasonable thing to do. I mean, this stuff, a lot of people don't like doing this stuff. So you actually have to use these game theory ideas and analogies. Just recognize that like you are rationalizing here to a certain extent. It's subjective. Make sure you're not double counting, but like, okay, we know there's correlations. And if I have a 2v2 for this lineup and one's correlated and one's not, and the points are about the same, then go with the correlation. Now you're not doing all the research to know if that actually was the best move, but you only can use the tools you have. And so the tools you have are these game theory ideas. And so with this Tampa game, I have a lot of Godwin, and it looks like he's more so a one-off. Okay. So I don't know what you guys, the experts who talk about sports all the time, would say that means. But in the New Orleans side, they're playing New Orleans, right?
Yep. Yeah. Tampa, New Orleans.
That has my fade, actually. I think we're doing a fade at the end of the game.
Keep it for the end. Yeah.
All right.
Alvin Kamara, because nobody else you're fading on New Orleans anyway.
Yeah, well, I guess.
Are you fading Marquez Callaway?
Yeah. My big fade of the week is Adam Troutman.
All right. I'm actually
coming in hot
on him.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But you're right, though. Like a lot of people don't want to do that stuff. Or you're like me and you're not smart enough to do that stuff, right? There's people out there like that as well that just it's too much. And that's why the tools are so important to somebody like myself, because I understand the tools and how to use the tools. How to put those tools together? No, I'm an idiot. Like there's no way in hell. So yeah, that's what it all comes down to. But Alex, are there any spots in this game that you really like from Tampa? Because right now Godwin's getting a decent amount of ownership, but how often, how many shows have you and I done together where it's like so many people in chat and I get it, but so many people worried about the one-on-one wide receiver cornerback matchup. And then it ends up not meaning anything because it's not shadow coverage anyway, or the wide receiver and the quarterback are just really good, or there's busted coverage, or a million different things, or the corner falls. Like there's so many factors that go into, if you always fade a really good receiver against a good corner, it's probably not always going to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that'll frustrate you if you go purely on matchups is that you have the perfect matchup and then the bad cornerback like commits pass interference or something. You get nothing for it. So, I don't know if there's that strong correlation between production and cornerback coverage. Definitely something that is fun to look at, but I think the overall team matchup probably matters more. The Godwin price is just way too low this week. So at 6,400 on DraftKings, I think that he makes a lot of sense. But that's not to diminish Fournette and Evans. They're definitely pretty strong options this week as well. I think my main play here is just the Brady stack because I feel like because of the passing rate, that just gives you a ton of upside that some teams that are more run heavy don't have. So
I guess we could talk about this Bills game a little bit too. Before we do, let me shout out PrizePicks. Phenomenal site, phenomenal app. It's awesome. We've been throwing out our picks on this all the time recently. And if you haven't signed up yet, I'm going to tell you what it is. But when you do, after I tell you this, be sure to use the promo code Awesemo. Up to $100 deposit bonus, first-time deposit bonus when you sign up for the first time. AWESEMO. So here's what makes PrizePicks cool. Number one, player prop based contest. You're making lineups, a 2, 3, 4, or 5 prop lineups with no juice on either side of these, right? It's the over or the under. Very simple, okay? Now, the difference is with the traditional books, if you have like a 5-leg parlay and you hit 4 of them and then you get beat up because you had this big money line favorite going into the late slate, going into Sunday Night Football, and they get smoked. They lose outright, and there, your parlay is gone. You win nothing. Not on PrizePicks. If you get 4 of 5, or you even hit 3 of 5, you can make money or at least make your money back. That's a huge way to not lose everything, right? If you hit all 5, you could up to 10x your entry fee, or you could just play a 2-player lineup or 3 or 4 or 5. It doesn't matter. You got football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Shit, you have cricket and disc golf last time I looked. I mean, they literally have anything over there, and you can mix all of those sports into one lineup if you're well-versed in more than one. So check it out. PrizePicks. Download the app in the App Store, Google Play Store, or go to prizepicks.com. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it over there. No MME, no sharks, no mass entry, anything like that. Alex, hit me with one for Sunday's slate of games.
Yeah, so one that I'm liking for Sunday, I guess I always like this prop for some reason, but the Jared Goff under, I think he barely covered last week, the over, but I just feel like the Lions passing offense is bad. They run at a pretty high rate, actually, in neutral situations. The problem is they've been down in games so much that it makes them look like they pass more than they do. But in base situations, they run 46% of the time, which is one of the highest marks in the NFL, say of teams with a rushing quarterback. So I just feel like Goff's over-unders are set based on the to-date pass ratio, and that's just projecting way too many passes. I take all the unders on Goff.
Love it. You know I'm going right back to the well with the touchdown props. You can use our tools too. They're free, our player prop tools at Awesemo to help you out. But or compare it to a traditional book. DraftKings has Dalvin Cook to score at -150. There's no juice here. Just yes or no. Over a half touchdown. So will he score against Dallas this week with no Dak Prescott? Shit. I mean, seriously, that seems like a wonderful bet, if you ask me. They're not going to be able to move the football in Dallas. And if that's the case, Dalvin Cook's going to run it down their throat, juiced heavy to the over everywhere else. But here, it's just over or under half a touchdown. So check it out. Use that promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. Get up to $100 when you sign up and deposit for the first time. All right, Brian, back to you. Bills in Miami here. This is one of the most fascinating games of the week to me, and I'm interested to see where you're coming in on it because they're 14-point favorites at home, right? 31.5 total is the highest of any team on this slate, but they are very pass heavy. They spread the ball around. Allen and Diggs are pretty expensive. They're not getting insane ownership though. But then you got some of the cheap guys with pretty low ownership, whether it be Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders. It looks like Tommy Sweeney is going to be the starting tight end this week with Dawson Knox out. What do you do with Buffalo with such a monster total against the bad defense?
It's interesting you said that. It's what it's showing here is, at least on Friday so far, is we're going to have some Allen, like 7%, so slightly under. That's not crazy for QB. But it's actually going more with the Sanders-Beasley stats.
That's what I like, too.
That's what, I just heard you say that. And this is confirming your bias there. So it looks something similar. And I'm kind of going through the individual lineups, too. And this is another thing I like about simulations is you could kind of, it is a little subjective, like Alex was saying, but test no stacks at all. So like when is Lamar Jackson a good time to, throw him in there to win a GPP without a stack? And Allen, he doesn't run as much, right, as he did the year before, a couple of years ago, but he could still, rush a couple in and, take some of those wide receiver TDs himself. And so I actually, it looks like I have a couple solo Allens too.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Especially Brian, and I know like we talk a lot about correlation, and Alex, I want to get your take on this too, but like, what about the like, if you're playing for the fact that yes, he's a Russian quarterback, but he also spreads the ball around a ton. So I guess there's very much the possibility that, one goes here, one goes here, one goes there. He runs one in, throws for over 300 yards, but no one has a huge game. Like, how do you factor that into the process, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is a really good point, Luffy. Yeah, the consolidated distribution of targets versus like a wide distribution of targets. So this is kind of going back when the show first started of when not all correlation is equal, right? So if you can find that closer consolidated distribution of targets, like those wide receivers are not going to match up to the correlation matrix you find on Google. It's going to be much higher, right? It's not going to be whatever 0.38 or something. It'll be like 0.5 or 6, or if it's Michael Thomas back in the day, which is Cooper Kupp is kind of seems like he's turning into that now. Yeah. Not all correlations are equal. So yeah, definitely if you see someone who's spread out like this, you could kind of, if we're doing all this in our head, maybe bump down that correlation in your head consciously a little bit. It might not be the worst idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right, Alex, where you have these, we talk about it often, where you've got like these super heavily concentrated offenses. And then you've got offenses where if you're stacking them like Arizona, Tampa Bay, Buffalo, of course you have your Evans or you have your Stephon Diggs. Like you still have your alpha on those teams, but it's not as pronounced as other spots because the quarterback in the offense just runs so smoothly. Like, what is your process for that? Do you just spray and hope that you hit the right one, or will you run some solo Allen lineups and hope that he can do what Brian was just talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely possible, but I generally would consider not stacking if I don't like the other plays on the team. But that's not the case this week. I think that Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, and Diggs are very good options. I mean, Buffalo is a big favorite in this one. Partly Miami's going to Buffalo, which is a bad weather shift, and they haven't been good to begin with. And then you also Buffalo's defense is tough, but Miami, I feel like they aren't going to be mincemeat in this one. Devontae Parker's coming back. Jasicki's a viable tight end play, and Waddle. So I feel like a game stack has some potential here. So with the Buffalo guys, the main thing I look at is they run the ball about 40%. That's a lot of passing volume. We don't know exactly if it's going to go to Diggs, Sanders, or Beasley, but that also makes your stack a little bit more unique, where a good comparison would be with Cooper Kupp, or I guess Devontae Adams is a good example, where he has such a big target share that it makes it harder to build a stack without Devontae Adams. So what that means is like all the Aaron Rodgers lineups have Devontae Adams. That's just like a higher ownership pairing, where like if you have Josh Allen, you can take one or two of these three guys, and even if Josh Allen's higher owned, that combination of players could be lower owned. So I think having more targets actually is like the advantage of having a lower owned combination negates any disadvantage of not knowing who's going to go to.
Where are you going to get more insightful information than these fellas right here? Hit that thumbs up. Get us to 100. We're over 300 watching right now. If you haven't hit it yet, it helps us a ton. Appreciate you in advance because I know you won't let me down. Brian, with Detroit and Philadelphia, we're really just looking. Oh, I did want to ask you something. Are there any run back options that you're getting a decent amount of with Miami against Buffalo or Houston against the Rams?
No, like I have Gieske. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Gajeski?
Gajeski.
Wait, no, that's that's my co-host. Mike Gesicki.
Gesicki, yeah. Sorry. Just not a whole lot of Miami there.
Alex, what about you? I'm sorry. Ever since we had Brian, Matt Gajeski was on a show with Alex Brown yesterday, former defensive end for the Bears, and he was on the team with the where they went to the Super Bowl. And I was like, Matt, you're a Brown Lions. God damn, you're a Bears fan? He's like, yeah. I was like, I didn't expect you to be a guy that roots for teams. He's like, well, I really liked that Hester Super Bowl team. And AB's jaw just goes agape. Like, Matt's like, it's the first person I thought of. He's like, well, I'm on the show and you didn't think of me. So Gajeski's stuck in my head for right now. But Alex, any run back options for you?
Yeah, it's awesome having Alex Brown on the show. So he just offers such a unique perspective. So
it's great. Yeah.
I like Miami as a stack or a run back this week. They run the ball at a low rate, so I mean their efficiency hasn't been good. It's been all of a sub 7 yards per attempt. Probably not going to change in a matchup versus Buffalo, but the ownership is pretty low on this one. We have Miami to is 1.4% in our projected ownership, and I mean. I think everyone's not going to have any confidence given Deshaun Watson rumors have been like hovering around the Dolphins like for the last month, but the receivers aren't terrible. You got 3 reasonable fantasy plays in Parker, Waddle, and Gesicki, so I might take a chance there.
What about this Lions and Eagles game, Alex? I mean, shit, I think you could be looking at a spot where the Lions just win this outright. It wouldn't be a surprise at all. It's only a 3-point spread, but that's besides the point. I guess the question is, when you look at Swift's ownership and then you look at this backfield for Philly, which right now is really in flux with Sanders going on to the IR, and then Jalen Hurts, who is the garbage time king right now. He really is. He's like a reincarnation of Blake Bortles playing for the Eagles. Because it does have like legitimate shootout vibes, but it could also be one of those games that ends up 13-10 and you go, yeah, why didn't I see that coming? These teams suck, you know? So I don't know how you're approaching it, but I think it'd be pretty helpful for people to hear it from both of you guys.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, this game, you got 2 weak teams going up against each other. Sorry, Laffy. I know you're an Eagles fan, but
listen, I'm a pessimist. You know that, man. I'm a realist.
Yeah, my eye test is telling me like the Eagles can't stop anyone, but the numbers don't look horrible for them defensively. But Detroit, this should be a spot where they'll have more success. Everyone's going to be going to Swift because he had a huge week last week. He's been one of the highest fantasy producers so far this year, and I have to admit, he looks like the only guy that's really priced reasonably on the Lions. You got their number 1 wide receiver, Khalif Raymond. He's like 5,300 on DraftKings this week. Maybe on Yahoo at 13, you can go for him. But yeah, I think they're just priced up a lot, and it's a run-heavy team, so I don't think I'm gonna stack it. But Swift looks like a reasonable play despite the ownership.
Brian, what are your thoughts on this game?
You know, kind of circling back to the last one and bringing this one in, when you ask like what's like how much run backs do you have and how many stacks do you have, it's kind of hard to answer. Like I'm only making 150 lineups, so if I have 7% of a quarterback whatever, so I have a lot of Hurts, but let's just say I didn't. Let's say I had like 7% Hurts. It's like, okay, how many of those few lineups are going to be bringbacks and shouldn't be bringbacks? So like, yeah, I'm going to have a couple for sure. But I agree with Alex. It's looking like it's not going to do much more than Swift on the bringback options here for Detroit. I have more of this Amon-Ra St. Brown fella than Khalif Raymond. So I don't know what that tells you, but I mean, I have a lot of the Hurts Goddard connection too. So
brother of Equanimous St. Brown.
That's right.
Yes, sir. How much Hurts do you have right now?
21%.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What are your, you talked about it a little bit, but what are your pairings with him mainly?
Yeah, Goddard and Devontae Smith mainly.
Do you have a lot of naked Hurts?
And then I can't count how many naked ones I have.
Gotcha. Okay.
Off the top of my head, but and Gainwell, is there some question mark there for the yards in the backfield?
So it's basically like this, right? Last week after Sanders went down, Gainwell got 60% of the snaps, but Boston Scott got 40%, had 7 carries. Gainwell had 5. Scott had 2 goal line carries though, and Gainwell was more involved in the passing game. And they're probably bringing Jordan Howard up from the practice squad. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying it's kind of a mess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
but Gainwell would be the top option there because of his pass catching ability.
That's what I have right now. And this is why when you're doing a Friday show, like they could look a lot different come Sunday. So, and that's a good thing about football is it's so popular. The markets get really, really sharp by Sunday.
Absolutely.
And you could be pretty sure that whatever information you're getting like is going to be pretty close to the mark. We're going to know, within reasonable accuracy what's going to be going on in almost all the games by Sunday. And so that could change.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And that's why you see all the casuals betting sides like an hour before kickoff.
Yeah, you're just throwing money away.
Yeah, right. You're flipping a coin, really. That's all you're doing.
Well,
and losing. That's exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm saying you'll win 50% of the time, but you'll actually lose. So yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Alex, let's close it out with this one before we get to our top pivots, fades, and favorite bet of the week over there on Odd Shopper, which you should definitely check out. I'll tell you why in a second. You wanted to talk about Panthers and Falcons, and I'm glad because, dude, Robbie Anderson, anyone that's seen any shows I've done this week would know he's 7th in targets over the last 4 weeks and 76th in yards. The fact that that's even possible, right? He's the wide receiver 56. He has a 25% target share on his own team, averaging like almost 10 targets per game. And he's the wide receiver 56, 76 in yards. For someone that's, with the analytics and data-driven as you are and can kind of see the forest for the trees, how do you look at a situation like this? Do you say, I have to keep attacking this volume? Or do you just say, like, the volume's there, but they're bad targets?
Well, I think that's a great example because I feel like targets have a lot more consistency than production, where it's harder to look at guys' efficiency throughout the year. Robbie Anderson's is particularly bad, 18 out of 49 catches. But I feel like that's not as reliable as the number of targets. He's been out there 91% of the time, only targeted 15%. So it's not great, but I think that he's someone to buy low on just because the efficiency has been horrible as far as how his catch percentage, but it's such an outlier that unless he's just a totally terrible player, he's going to be a lot better than he has been. So I think this Carolina stack as a whole is a buy low for me. Darnold's been pretty rough this year, 6.8 yards per attempt, got benched last week. But Atlanta, there's two advantages. Their defense isn't particularly good. And the other advantage is that they throw the ball a lot. So that creates shootout potential. So I think this one, even though the over-under is not super high, maybe this will be one of the more overlooked games.
Tyler, do I have to be out? Do I have a hard out at 55 or can we go to 12? I think we're good till 12, right? All right. Brian, close out the games discussion here with Carolina and Atlanta, and tell me where you're going with Cordarrelle Patterson. This guy has been crazy, unpredictable this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of opposite actually of Alex right now on Carolina. I'm over on the important players, Darnold, Anderson, Hubbard, and more.
Okay.
I was over too. Yeah.
Oh, you were? I thought you said you didn't like it. I'm sorry. Atlanta, I'm even with Patterson. I mean, what a mess! Like I'm just thinking of my fantasy, my season long. I have Mike Davis. My first pick was McCaffrey, and I've Ridley too. So he's done nothing, and I have a decent amount of Ridley here. And I'm assuming I'm not looking at the stacks, but I'm assuming Ridley's going to be a big part of those bringbacks.
All right, so let's have some fun with this one. Brian, we'll go to you as our guest of honor. Again, before we head out, at Brian Hooper _ on Twitter, brick75.com. Throw that in the lower, Tyler, for me, since there's no K in there. And then the Lulz podcast, LOLZ with Pete Overzet. Check out everything Brian's doing. He's doing some great stuff in the industry. And follow Alex while you're at it. Awesemo DFS, myself, Laffy _D. Hit us all up. Why not? Brian, favorite fade and favorite pivot for the week of 8.
Okay. Well, I already gave away my fade. I'm looking at fading Kamara.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it doesn't seem like you guys hate that one. And what are we defining as a pivot here?
It doesn't have to necessarily be a pivot off of Kamara, but somebody that's low owned that you're getting considerably more than the field right now.
Okay.
And I know it's Friday, but
I gotcha. let's see, that one's not sexy. I got a couple I could throw out that aren't super, like Dan Arnold, tight end, I'm over on, and Michael Carter, RB.
We didn't get to talk about him. I like Michael Carter this week. The volume should be there. So yeah.
If it stays at 6% anyways, ownership.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, what about you?
So my fade is Gainwell. I feel like he's most likely going to get a little bit more work with Miles Sanders out, but you did have Boston Scott sliding in there. I just fear that Gainwell is more of a guy they're going to continue using in this pass catching, change of pace role, while Jordan Howard will be the kind of the power runner, and Boston Scott will also get some carries. So I feel like he's pretty iffy. My pivot, this one's totally off the board, but 0.6% owned right now, Rashad Penny. Now, yeah, he's 4K, the minimum price. So that really opens up the rest of your lineup. He ran routes on 38% of dropbacks last week for Seattle. He got some carries. But I feel Alex Collins' health has been kind of iffy. DJ Dallas and Travis Homer didn't play that much last week. So I feel like he's got enough workload to get there at 4K. But I mean, this might be a little bit off the board, I have to admit.
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit.
It's a little crazy.
I could appreciate it. I'll go. I like the Kamara fade, but I'm going to go with Gainwell. Not obviously fully fading, but I do think if his ownership continues to come up, there are a lot of mouths to feed in that backfield, and we already learned that Sirianni's a dummy, and I don't really know how he's going to use these guys. If he's going to abandon the run and use Boston Scott in the passing game, I'm going to go to a much lesser owned Khalil Herbert, who might not have as good of a matchup, but is averaging over 20 touches per game over the last 3 weeks. So I'll take the volume there with Herbert at essentially the same price. All right, Brian, favorite bet. What do we have for week 8?
Not a sexy one. And hopefully I do price props on my site for free if people want to go check it out. And I got Donald Parham Jr. receptions and yards, receptions a little more, both unders. If it's still there, it was 1.5, over was minus 130, under was 100. So if it's still there, that's what I priced it at.
Man, I swear we did not coordinate this, but that's wonderful because oddshopper.com, I was looking at it. I sorted by expected win rate, and Donald Parham, Alex, the expected win rate on his under receiving yards and under receptions, both two of the three highest, actually the first and third highest expected win rate of any prop on Sunday's slate.
Yeah, for a backup tight end, 14.5 is pretty high. So I like that. He's only been running routes on about a third of plays, only targeted on 10% of those. So that's a nice one. For mine, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I feel like the Lions, people are just forecasting them to pass a lot more than they do. So I feel like going to any unders on Lions players is going to be, as far as the receiving, is going to be a winning bet. Right now, there aren't a ton on the board, so I'm just going to stick with that Goff under 265. We have him projected for 238.
Love it. And you see Odd Shopper up there right now. If you click on Shop NFL, you'll see all of this. Sort by your state, of course. You can filter by expected win rate, expected ROI, using our projections to give you the best bets. And not only that, not only is it like 2 clicks and you're in, super easy, but if you look down there below the name, you'll see where the best bet is. So if you wanted to take that under 1.5 receptions on Donald Parham, you could get it at DraftKings for even money. Under receiving yards right now, it's at 14.5. DraftKings has the best one there. It's just the easiest way to bet right now. Check it out. It's totally free as well. I'll close this one out. Give me Dalvin, or no, you know what? Where did it go? There it is. Jared Cook under 263.5 passing yards. We have it over an 70% expected win rate. He has done this. He has over this once in the past 6 games, and it was 268, but that's besides the point. Philly, one thing they do relatively well is that pass rush. but their run defense, they've been awful lately. And I don't think Goff is going to be in a situation where he's forced to throw, given how bad their offense has been. So I think this will be a relatively conservative game script and approach for them. They'll look to lean on Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, and you'll see a kind of pedestrian passing game for Jared Goff. So give me that under 263.5 passing yards. That'll do it for us. Thanks as always for hanging out. Hit up Brian again at Brian Hooper _ bio. You can see all of his stuff if you missed me saying it earlier. Alex at Awesemo DFS. Enjoy Miami, brother.
Thanks.
And myself at Laffy _D. Shout out to Tyler Zander for producing this show. And don't forget, we got plenty of content coming up throughout the day. Next up on the list, we got the NFL Strategy Top Stack Show with Greg and Gundacker. Catch you back here for the next one. Peace. It's a great way to say his name, though, isn't it?
Yeah.